Hey everybody, Dan Saavedra here from MergeYourData.com, and today we're going to go over how you can use Webhook Triggers to kick off HubSpot workflows and do various things inside of HubSpot. Now, this is a beta feature, but they should be rolling it out soon, and we're just going to walk through how you can set this up. We're going to set up a test and then talk about some of the details associated with the feature itself. So the first thing that we're going to do is in HubSpot, we're going to create workflow, and we're going to do it from scratch. And then we're going to choose a contact-based workflow because right now that's the only thing that you can do with a webhook event trigger. So we're going to keep the blank workflow and click on next. And then what we're going to end up doing is clicking on the contact enrollment trigger and then going down here to the advanced options and selecting from a webhook. And right now we don't have any webhook events set up. So you can read more about webhook events if you want to by clicking here. Otherwise, we're going to create a webhook event and it's going to open up this configurator. So I'm going to name this test webhook for our webhook event name. And then I'm going to click on next. And HubSpot here is going to provide a webhook URL that we can paste into any application that we're trying to send data from. So for this, we're going to use Zapier just to keep it simple, but any platform that can post to a URL, you'll be able to send those webhooks to HubSpot here. And the important thing to note on this screen is that you're going to have to click on the copy button in order to trigger this waiting for the test event loading bar, I guess you can say, because HubSpot needs to have a static data structure that you can map specifically and tell it what data types are coming in. Unfortunately, at this time, it doesn't seem like a dynamic data structure is possible. That might be something that HubSpot does in the future. But for right now, you need a static data structure that HubSpot can map out. And so clicked on copy here. I'm going to go back to Zapier. I'm going to choose a Webhooks by Zapier event to configure. I'm going to do a post request, click on continue. And then I'm going to change the payload type to JSON and paste in the URL that HubSpot provided. So one important thing to note is that HubSpot actually gives you an option to go back in the configurator. So let's say we go beyond this step and start mapping out fields. If you go back, you're actually going to have to copy this webhook URL again, because HubSpot changes this when you go to configure the webhook another time. So that's an important note when you're going to build things out. You might run into that snag. But what we're going to do is we're going to provide some sample data. This is a critical note when you're configuring your webhook. And that's that you need an email to identify the contact inside of HubSpot. HubSpot requires you to map the email from the webhook that's coming in to the email field or email property inside of HubSpot. And so I'm going to start with email. And I'm going to type in a test value. This is one field we'll do, and then I'll do like first name. Do Dan. I don't know why Zapier is acting weird here. We can put in anything else as well. I'll just do a last name to keep it simple. So I'll do test. And then I'm going to scroll down here all the way to the bottom, click on continue, and then I'm going to test step. And what we should get is an ID and response to the post request that we sent out. And so if we go back to HubSpot here, we'll see that it got this test data successfully. And so we're good to go. We can go to the next step here. We can retry a new test event in case we want to change the data structure or something doesn't look right. But we're going to click on next because it all looks good. And then we'll get to this mapping field or this mapping window here. And all we have to do is select the data type for each of our fields that comes through. Now, this is obviously very annoying if you have a really large payload coming through. So you do have to sit there and map out the data types for each of these properties coming through. Let's see. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. These property labels are what you see in the workflow when you're configuring the mapping. Let's say you're copying it to one object. inside of HubSpot. So you can change this if it's easier for you to read and you just want users to be able to easily identify the label. You can also change this in case something is coming through on a webhook. Let's say it's like a very standard webhook that you can't control the payload that's coming through. You can rename the labels for the workflow or for the webhook inside of HubSpot specifically, so it's easier to interpret and map for your users inside the system. But either way, you can see it's pretty standard: text, number, Boolean, specific values. The specific values one can be helpful for data quality just by limiting what data can be sent into HubSpot. But we're just going to click on next here to go to the next step. And the last configuration window here is what we talked about earlier, which is you need to select a mapping to the email property inside of HubSpot from your webhook payload. And so we're going to map email to email and we're good to go. Now we click on next. Our webhook event was created, so that's great. We're going to continue to the setup. Once we have this webhook event created, all we have to do is click on the webhook itself to map it as a trigger. And then we can do anything from there. So we can add in additional filters just like any of the other triggers you can use inside of workflows. So I'm just going to click on save. And an important thing to note is that the email that we're mapping to the HubSpot email is the contact that the webhook is going to run on. So that's the context of the workflow. It's not like you're just running a workflow that's disassociated with any contact. Whatever email is in the webhook payload is going to be the contact that this workflow runs off of. And so from here, we can pretty much do anything we want. Let's say we just wanted to update some properties, then we would do set property value. Obviously for this one, we did first name. That's an example. And then when we go to select the new value, all we have to do is collapse this enrolled contact section, and you'll see the test webhook fields that we mapped. And so we can select first name here and we're good to go. We map the first name from the test webhook. So everything will show up inside of these enrollment properties section under the name of your webhook. It's very similar to some attribution events where it kind of shows up in the bottom here in your workflows. So you just kind of have to scroll and look for it. But otherwise, that's pretty much where it's stored, and everything else is normal inside of the workflow. So I thought this was a really powerful new feature from HubSpot, especially because people tend to use things like Zapier as an in-between to trigger workflows inside of HubSpot. So they'll post a webhook to Zapier and then trigger a workflow or update a property in HubSpot. But with this, you can instead just hopefully go direct to HubSpot's contact instead. So really useful, can save some complexity in the tech stack, can save some cash if you're spending on some big Zapier plans or something like that with a lot of webhooks coming through. As of right now, there doesn't seem to be too low of a limit from HubSpot's side. I'm sure that'll change in the future just because webhooks can be pretty excessive, put a pretty excessive load on the system depending on how you set it up. So hopefully this was useful for you all. I'm Dan Saavedra. I run MergeYourData.com. We pitch ourselves as the marketing sidekick, so you're not wasting all your time wrangling with data in the systems, and instead you can get to marketing and the stuff that actually moves the needle. So hopefully this was useful. Hopefully this shows you a little bit more in terms of the power of data inside of HubSpot, and you're able to use this feature in your day-to-day.